Hey everybody, thanks for coming. As the gentleman said, I'm Graham Melley from Scope AR. For those of you who aren't familiar with Scope AR, we've been around in this field for about 5 years, doing augmented reality instructions. We started out as a service provider, doing complex projects directly for enterprise, big companies. Had a lot of success doing that kind of stuff. And learned a lot. And right from the get-go, we knew one thing for sure, is that to be effective in this field, we've never honestly showed anyone this technology, augmented reality instructions in general, and had them say, well, I don't understand how we would use it. I'm sure that's not news to anyone in this room. I mean, it's an effective technology. I think the benefits are quite clear in terms of being a really effective communications tool. So we found, if anything, the next questions, the barriers to entry are kind of twofold usually. The first one is the concern over being the people that picked beta and having the world go VHS. I mean, I think that's a big concern, future-proofing. Everybody's worried about that. We've sort of addressed that. The other one, which I can get back to later, the other one is we don't want to be beholden to a third-party service provider to be trying to scale. We can't be sending out the kinds of money it would take to implement our content in scale. So we knew very early on that we needed to be working towards getting out of the service side and making it into a product where people could make their own high-quality instructions and basically get out of their way. So from the get-go, what we've been doing is creating our own tools, but knowing that we're going to make them public-facing or client-facing, and actually eventually public-facing, we believe. So these are the kinds of instructions that we've been making for a long time, very clear, very easy to understand. And we found very quickly we managed to get down to a level where we didn't need to be changing a lot every time. We sort of had the model that people really reacted to well, understood it, very simple to work with, no complex interface. One of the issues, as a number of speakers have talked to about here, is adoption and resistance with a potentially aging workforce. And an aging workforce can be an issue. A lot of this is about knowledge transfer, wanting to capture that knowledge before it retires from the workforce and maintain it, because the generation that's receiving that knowledge, even if that transfer happens effectively, aren't staying at that position for 40 years or 50 years like the previous generation. They're going to go to 4 or 5 careers, and are they going to pass that knowledge along? I mean, it's a bit of a dice game. So our tagline is put your knowledge where you need it, and that's what it's about, is leveraging that internal knowledge. Every organization has it, but quite often it's centered in 1 or 2 people even, or maybe a short list anyway, that's, that knows everything. They're those, that guy or that woman that you have to call if something goes badly wrong, and sometimes they're flying in. So capturing that knowledge and leveraging it. So that brings us to WorkLink, which I should note quickly that Scope AR, we actually launched another project here at AWE last year called Remote AR, which addresses the same problem from a different angle, putting your knowledge where you need it, separated in time. So where you have the knowledge, he's online, that expert or she, and you want to leverage that across distance rather than across time. So that was a great product for us. It's going great guns. So if you remember our name and you're not sure why, that's the other side of what we do. This year, we're launching our brand new product, which is WorkLink. I say it's brand new, even though really it's the culmination of our entire experience in this field. So really, it's our internal tool set that we've honed to the point where it's ready to put in the hands of subject material experts. And I say that clearly because it's not about, although it's useful for third-party developers, I mean, and we're certainly happy. We understand that a lot of people don't want to do their own necessarily content start to finish. But it's our goal certainly to make sure that they can if they want to. So it's an ecosystem, a complete ecosystem. So it's all about smart instructions, and I'll talk a bit in a minute about what that means, smart instructions. But it's an ecosystem in that it's smart instructions that you can author easily. Our mandate is to make it the PowerPoint of augmented reality. And so that we actually work within a Unity shared environment, we call it, with Scope AR. So we're creating actually a very massive extension onto Unity so that you can utilize that compatibility, that 3D engine, that familiar environment, if you are familiar with it, and stand on the shoulders. We get to stand on the shoulders of using that rendering engine, not having to maintain all that, and charge our customers for the pleasure. So it's an easy authoring environment. You don't need to know anything about Unity. whatsoever to use it. In fact, we're just happy if you've never seen it before. We teach you everything you need to know in about a 2-hour tutorial. Again, PowerPoint for augmented reality. We want it very, very straightforward. So the third aspect of this is immediate verification. This comes back to the experience we've had working with big enterprise for the last 5 years. We try very hard not to tell people what they're looking for. We try to listen to them. And one of the things we heard over and over and over again, in fact, comes back, a quick anecdote, to the very first major project we did. We went into a major mining concern into the foreman of the shop to get him to show us a maintenance procedure that we were doing a linear instruction for. And we were showing him how the product worked, because he'd never heard of augmented reality. And the first thing he asked was, is that a camera on that device? And it was an iPad. And we said, yeah, I mean, you can see the video feed, it's a camera. He said, can it take pictures? And we said, yeah, it's a camera, it can take pictures. He said, well, our biggest problem by far is we send something out into the field, you know, a major $1 million piece of equipment. Those guys do maintenance on it every day. We do the 6-month maintenance on it. At some point, it fails. They say it's because we screwed up the 6-month maintenance. We say it's because they screwed up the daily maintenance. And if we had a camera to just take pictures during the maintenance process, that would change my life. So it was a big eye-opener for us on day one, that as much as they reacted really well to the augmented reality instructions, they were at least equally as happy about a simple camera in that device. So during that process, they could do verification. So when that torque setting was made and that bolt was cranked, they could take a picture and say, this was the torque setting, so don't be complaining to us if the thing fails in the field. So that's immediate verification. What we do is we build in, on the authoring side, you can implement this type of verification into your instructions extremely easily. So the kind of data that we're sending back, and this comes back to this concept of an ecosystem, and this is kind of it right here, is that after it's implemented, as soon as somebody launches that instruction, in the old days we would call it dumb instructions, what we used to do, just simple instructions in a linear fashion. Very effective communication tools showed you exactly what you had to do and how to do it, but it wasn't feeding back. So now when you launch WorkLink instructions, you're actually getting, you're launching a session. And that session automatically, with, you know, invisible to the end user, it's actually recording the date, the time, who he is or she, and the fact that they've started activity, and then tracks their progress as they go through step by step. So the amount of time they spend on a step, how much time it takes them to do the entire procedure, or actually if they don't finish the procedure, it can interrupt that, you know, and just track where they're at in the procedure. Then, of course, back in the CMS, management has the capability to interact with that, look at that information, do comparative analysis. So you can see, geez, Rick seems to be taking a heck of a long time every time he does a procedure. Or, geez, actually, Rick is doing step 4 in 12 minutes and everybody else is taking 22. So let's go talk to Rick and see what's going on there. Or maybe one particular step, everybody is taking 3 times longer than we expect. So why is that? And let's act on that. So process improvement has obviously greatly helped. So all that is passive information that's coming back, and it's marked there as process data. So from that secure content server, you're seeing that loop where you're seeing that go to smart instructions, getting fed out to that workforce. And as you can see noted there through icons, doesn't matter what device, we're completely agnostic to hardware. So as soon as new hardware enters the market, we support it. Same, by the way, goes for the flip side of things, the tracking technology. We just had Tango on the stage. We love Tango. We've implemented it immediately as soon as it came onto the market. HoloLens, same thing. We're working towards getting that up to speed right now. So the other side of the process data that gets fed, though, is as an author, you can easily add in checklist items. So what you can do there is actually directly prompt that person who's doing that work and ask them, okay, we've just asked you to take a measurement in your step-by-step instruction. Tell us what that measurement is. So you can actually you can prompt for data to come to be fed directly back to the management flow and to the author and to the server. So in the CMS, it's storing all that information. So we can prompt you for anything. It's as simple as it might be as simple as, are you wearing your protective eyeglasses? And it's one thing to say, yeah, I know I have to wear my eyeglasses, but it's another thing to have a date and time stamp with your name attached to it that basically signed it at that place and date and time that says, yes, I'm wearing them now. So that's a very simple implementation, but it's tracked and stored and stamped. But beyond that, and what's maybe a better one, is you're doing a maintenance procedure and the question comes up, we've told you to take out a spring seal, and we've asked you to check it to see if it's suitable for reuse during that maintenance procedure. Well, it's 10 minutes till lunch. Let's see. I think that's suitable for reuse, because I'll just close this back up and no one's the wiser. It doesn't look great, but whatever, it's all fine. Well, now we prompt you, the author has decided to prompt that person to say, take a picture if that's ready for reuse. So now you've got photographic verification of what you've said. So all different kinds of data, and we're actually working towards more. We're getting feedback from clients to say what kinds of prompts would you like to include. But obviously that's very useful. And this comes, as I say, as a direct result of the experience that we've got working with clientele, and to a certain extent harkens right back to that very first conversation with that first foreman, telling us what he wants to see. So I included a couple of images here just to give you a sense of context of how these things are getting used. So this would be an electrical process. We have a demo down at the booth, if anybody's seen it, of a circuit breaker. Very simple little circuit breaker. Probably not complicated enough to warrant augmented instructions, but we use it because it's nice and portable. But it gives you a sense of how things work. One of the major advantages of doing these kinds of step-by-step assisted activities is that you can also prompt safety issues immediately as they're needed. So exactly as you're about to go into something, say, this is a safety concern. Again, it's one thing to tell somebody in a training session or an orientation session about specific dangers where they're going into harm's way, but it's a whole lot more effective when you can tell them when they're literally about to throw a switch what the problem's going to be, or when they're literally about to remove a piece of equipment, what they have to be watching out for. So that's that kind of thing. So that's, I'm going to flip over right now and show you more of a hands-on look at the software. And as I said, oh, that's interesting. Let me just kill PowerPoint since it's hogging the video feed. There we go. Okay, so this is the Unity environment. As I said, it's actually the Unity / Scope AR shared environment, because that's how we do things. So if you've got, has anybody in here used Unity? Okay, so for those people who've used Unity, you'll be very familiar with what you're looking at. For those of you who haven't, it doesn't make a difference. We're very specifically not requiring you to know anything about Unity, anything about animation, anything about instructional material whatsoever. This is, as I say, specifically designed to be very accessible to anyone. In fact, the ideal use case for us is the subject matter expert is executing this content because he knows what he's doing. Again, we learned through hard experience that if you're creating this content, you kind of have to become expert in it. So we had many long nights of becoming subject matter experts in content in order to deliver content for that client. So why not take out the middleman, which is us? So what we're looking at here, we basically have 3 levels of interactivity with the instructional material. So if you think of it as kind of a manual or a book, you've got chapters. So this represents, we're at the top level of interaction, which is the project editor. So each one of these boxes represents a sequence, which is basically equivalent to a chapter in a book. So we've got an introduction sequence, which basically just has a title and a menu to welcome you there, to welcome you to the project and allow you to select. So this particular project is a teardown of a pump. It's the same one that I had showed, sort of the promotional image showed a guy working on a pump, same idea. So we've got preparation to get you started. We've got disassembly to take that apart, and then maintenance, which would be where you would assess maybe a gasket, whether or not you're going to replace it, and then reassembly to put it back together. So you can see a nice, simple environment for working with those things. If there's any complexity to that, if there's anything that might look a little intimidating, which I would hope it sure doesn't, because it's not, but it might be those connecting lines. And really, there's nothing much to that. You see those red lines, those are being drawn automatically to represent the menu items that are available in that introduction to let you access any one of those things or actually restart the introduction. So those red lines are actually automatically generated just to show you that there is a virtual connection between those steps. The yellow ones I can define, and that basically just says if I'm in preparation and I move forward step by step in a linear way, I want that to feed directly into disassembly if I move forward out of that sequence. So I can actually just delete those. It's just a drag and drop to connect those up together. So very, very simple. I could right-click to delete these, rename. It's pretty much exactly how you'd expect it to work. We're not trying to reinvent any wheels here. So I'm going to drop down out of this top layer into actually looking at one of these sequences. So I'm just going to double-click into disassembly. And as you can see, this is just a sequence of steps. So this really, again, to come back to PowerPoint, this would be a sequence of slides, essentially. Or in the metaphor of the instruction manual, this would be the contents of a chapter page by page. So 6 pages here. So I can drag and drop to move these around. That's pretty much it. So nothing too complicated there. So I'm going to double click to go into one of these. And this gets me down into the step editor. So now I'm looking at the contents of an individual page. And I've got, now that I'm down into a level of a step, I'm actually looking at some real content now, because obviously it's only at the step level that we need to show you something. So on this particular page, this is the content that you need to see. So what we're looking at right now is the scene view, which is where we would do the 3D interaction. So I'm actually going to quickly, actually we're already in the properties view. There's 3 components to working on a step. And that might sound like a lot as we're moving through this so quickly, but I would sort of mention that I'm actually teaching you how to use the software. There's probably most of you could actually walk out of here and just about do something with it, because I'm going to rattle through everything very quickly. But I am going to rattle through everything. So it's the fact that we can even pull that off on this kind of time frame, I think tells you a little bit that we've accomplished our goal of making this very straightforward and easy to use. So we're seeing content at the top. What we're seeing here, as it identifies the step editor, we're also seeing that there's 3 different modes, as I said: timeline, properties, and checklist. So properties, in order to look at properties, I'm going to switch over to another view, which is labeled in Unity the game view, but what we actually like to refer to it as is the device preview mode. So by clicking on that now, you can see this is basically a preview of what it's going to look like once it gets onto a device. I think I mentioned before, but we're completely agnostic to that hardware output. So when we publish these instructions, that could be an iOS device, a smartphone, an iPhone, an iPad, an Android tablet, an Android smartphone, glasses, ODGs, whatever the case may be. So that's a look at how that's going to look. So the properties editor, which is, as I say, where we're at right now, is all about defining that 2D layer of information that overlays on top of the 3D stuff. So basically, the description of the step. So what you're seeing here is a sequence of 3 headers at the top, and we actually use those as, some of you are probably familiar with the concept of a cookie crumb or breadcrumb type of navigation. So that's what that is. So we've got, that's the basis, those 3 steps, and you can actually click on those. So the first one's pump maintenance to show you the type of project you're in, the name of the project you're in. At any time, the user can actually tap on that and link back to the start of the process. Disassembly 2, that's the name of the, disassembly is the name of the sequence we're in, and we're in the second step of disassembly. I jumped into the second step to show you this particular step. And then this is the name of that page, which is remove pump body assembly. You can actually use those headers however you want. We allow you to link them to whatever page you want to link to. Some people use these in a different way than we had intended, actually, to link to reference pages, and that works too. It's a very easy to use implementation, but we give you a template to work with something that makes sense to us right off the bat, and again, through our experience, we've seen works well. And then obviously the last factor there, or not quite the last, I guess, but the actual description of what we want you to do on this step. Navigation is by default back and forward, nothing complicated there, and you're able to define insets to throw on top of it. So that's that 2D information layer that sits on top. Very easy to work with, and this properties editor lets you define all of them. So the first thing you can see here is the step type. So currently it's set to content. In other words, a basic normal page of instruction. We could change that to, for instance, we've got templates set up here for a title page. We could interactively change that now to we've got a EULA page, an end user license agreement. We allowed you can put whatever you want in there. We often generically refer to it as the legal page, because whenever you're doing instructions, there's bound to be some legal, some caveats that you need to be aware of. So basically everything, again, as a result of our hard experience, we're pretty aware of the common things that are going to be needed in here. But in this case, content is the step type. Let's flip that back there. We also provide you a warning content, which might be appropriate here, just same in red, nothing too complicated there. So if I flip back to content, that's the step type, that's the template basically that you're selecting to use. Those headers that we talked about, so what you're filling in on the stop of those, and then on the top of those rather, the header information, and then the ability to define those links as I talked about. So you can just pull that down, you've got access to every page that you've generated in the project, and you can link directly to it. Nothing complicated there. the text description. We recommend, you've probably got those work instructions somewhere if you're making this, so you just copy and paste the text, you know, easy as can be. And insets. So you've got the option to add a number of different insets up on the side, supporting information. You might snap some photos on the shop floor and just use a photo to show a detailed view of what you're talking about in the instructions. You might use it as we have here to show a warning. We actually ship with a full complement of warning options, and we'll add to that library of supported content that comes with it. But you know, in this particular case, we actually do have one already. Which works and makes sense. So you can change the height. We have different options for insets. You can put in video. You can put in actually a sort of a secondary view of your object from a specific angle if there's maybe a detail view you want to show. It's a fairly new feature. And that's pretty much it. We've got an option here for a tracker indicator, which just lets you know if you're not seeing any imagery. So that's that top layer. So obviously, moving right along here, we've got the 3D content behind it. So we deal with that in the timeline view. So anybody who's done any kind of work in animation or in video editing or anything like that will be pretty comfortable here. It's just it's a pretty standard, straightforward approach. If there's already an interface that exists for anything that we're doing, we're trying to emulate it because the name of the game here is user-friendly. So we haven't tried to reinvent this. Having said that, if you haven't used it, you'll find it very comfortable and very easy to use. So what we're seeing here is a graph of time starting at 0 seconds on this particular project. This particular step, rather, is a little bit complicated. It's got a few aspects to it. I can maybe give a little bit more room there to see. So there's a wrench that comes in, removes these 2 bolts. These 2 hands come in and remove that assembly. So it's, you know, it's kind of one of the longer steps, more complicated ones. And as you can see, it's easy for me to just drag this, we would call it a playhead, around to take a look at that. And that information, that activity is being generated by these little doohickeys down here, which are, we call them time bars, but they're basically just little segments of animation. There's a rotation, there's a movement, there's an opacity change or a fade out. So what those do is just define that motion. And down the left side here, you can see these are groups. So everything in here is just defining some way of dealing with this 3D content. It's either making it move around or it's making it visible or invisible. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So I'm going to kick forward one step here. So this is a little bit of a simpler step. So this is removing this volute diffuser. So as you can see, we've got a couple things going on here. It's a different rendering quality. And that's actually, we're defining that here also. So down here, in this particular group, which I've named, I don't know if you can see it there or not, but hero, that's this object. So I've just basically grabbed that object. I'm going to flip back over into the scene view, which you may remember is, so we're no longer in the device preview, but we're just accessing that 3D content directly. So basically, I can just select that object and do whatever I want with it, and that's how we would access and create this instruction. So what I'm actually going to do, you can see here, I'll just point out quickly, there's a movement here, and that's moving it off of the equipment. Then I've got a spin control, which is making it rotate. That's a little bit of an extra. I like to throw those details in sometime. We find if it's aesthetically pleasing to work with, people just enjoy it more. That's, again, one of those things that we've learned is why not? It's easy to throw in there. Why not make it look interesting? And then there's a movement to make it go up, and then a fade out, as you can see on here. So why not? I'm just going to select all those things and delete them and just show you how I would generate that. So I'm going to grab that object, and oops, just got something in the way there. There we go. So basically, I can hit record. That's what the record button here is for. I can then drag that right in the 3D view. Now, if you've done any kind of 3D content before, you'll find this very, very, very easy. You'll have done it 1,000 times. If you haven't, we'll run you through exactly how to do it. It's pretty straightforward. So having made that move, I'm just going to hit stop, and as you can see, it generated that movement. So that's now happening. So I can drag across. You can see the results of that. I can also move that little time bar to wherever I want to put it, but it's actually right where I want it. So that's basically that. If I then follow that up by right-clicking next to that object, and I'm going to add a spin, and I'm going to just tell it what axis I want it to spin on. Oops. Let's try that one more time. Okay. I think I just hit the wrong key there. So do that one more time. So I'll hit record, move that out, hit stop, that generates the movement, and add that spin along the Y. There we go. So nice and easy, as you can see. So one revolution, and then you just have to determine which direction it's going to spin on it and add it that. So that's working just fine. So now the last step I wanted to do was add a vertical motion, or I guess the second last. Move it up, hit stop. There's a movement. I'll just do that. So the last thing I wanted to do was have it fade out. So I'm going to do that again with a right click. So these are preset animations, and we're actually adding to that group of things that you can just do automatically all the time. But for the moment, we'll just add a fade out. And there you go. So I've just basically completed a step. So the other nice thing about this product is you can just go ahead and hit preview, and that's going to use either a web camera that's built into your laptop, or you can use an external webcam through a USB device or whatever the case. So as you can see, I'm actually seeing through my laptop's webcam now a live preview of exactly what this is going to do. So the nice thing about this too is this actually works completely along with tracking. So you can preview exactly how that's going to function in augmented reality right on your laptop or desktop system or whatever you're using. Macintosh or Windows, by the way, no difference. And get a real sense for how that's going to work. So some of our users actually aren't even necessarily using it for step-by-step content. They're just using it for this, the ability to do pre-visualization, put different things on onto markers, and preview content that way. So that's very convenient. So I'm just going to turn that off. You can run the entire project that way and preview the entire project, including navigation. I'm just in a step, so we're just seeing one step. But you can preview the entire thing, start to finish, that way. So I'm just showing you here something here. It's a little bit more complicated of a step, but it basically all functions the same way. One of the things I did want to point out very quickly is that we are adding new tools all the time, constantly listening to what our clients are looking for. And one of the things that we've noticed and are implementing, it's actually, if I had a little bit more time here, I would show it to you, but is an auto tool function, we call it. So rather than having to animate the tools, for instance, you can grab a bolt, right-click on it, hit Auto Tool, and select Wrench. So if you're using a bolt, it'll actually add a wrench and add a revolution, so that you don't have to do any of that, any of that pesky animation. Anywhere we can save you a minute, we're going to save you a minute. And in that particular case, you can actually access a pull-down to say open wrench, closed wrench, adjustable wrench, Allen wrench even, because it's all the same motion. So we're constantly building that library to give you whatever 3D content you might need, whatever preset animations you might need, and or the images, those kinds of things. So just wrapping up here, I was going to show you a little bit more. I guess suffice it to say that if you hit, once you've gone through creating your content, you hit publish, log in with your credentials. About 15 minutes later, you'll have built Android and iOS versions of all your content, and you can access it anywhere from the field. If you're on the internet or intranet, whoever's got access that you've allowed access to can start running those instructions and work with what you've made. So that's WorkLink. Thanks for coming, everybody. And if you got any questions, please let us know. And I'll be happy to help you out. Sure, sure.
We have one question from the audience. Anyone have questions? In the back. Hold on. Wait for the mic.
In terms of revenue sharing, how does that work? Is it a paid plugin or?
Oh, so yeah, it's a licensed piece of software. So we're extending Unity. So you would actually it would be an extension to your Unity Pro license probably. We don't actually require that you have Unity Pro, but likely any kind of venture, any kind of enterprise obviously would probably qualify for Unity Pro. That's a part of what we would, yeah. So but we're not financially entangled at that point. You'd license the software and do what you do with it.
Oh, so the pricing on that would be
Monthly license. Yeah, on an annual basis, month to month for an authoring
ballpark
seat.
would be. About that, or?
It depends on your situation. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. But
Thank
yeah,
you.
it depends on scale. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Graham. And we're going to take.